Have you ever laid awake at night, listening to the silence, and wondered if we are truly alone? We often cast our gaze upwards to the sea of stars, searching for a sign, a whisper from a distant world. But what if we have been looking in the wrong direction? What if the most profound message, the one that changes everything, was never meant to arrive from the cold depths of space, but to rise from the warm, deep heart of our own Earth? Tonight, we journey into a story of discovery, a story of a signal finally decoded that proves we are not the first intelligent minds to call this planet home. Prepare to drift into slumber as we uncover the legacy of those who walked the earth long before us. For decades, our search for others has been a story of radio telescopes and hopeful listening. Projects like SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, have scanned the heavens, analyzing faint radio waves for any pattern, any hint of artificial origin. The famous WOW signal of 1977 remains a tantalizing ghost in the machine, a brief, powerful burst of energy that was never heard again. We have been conditioned to think of first contact as an event that comes from above. But a new field of thought, a quiet revolution in scientific inquiry, has proposed a different idea: the Silurian hypothesis. It asks a simple, yet world-altering question. If an industrial civilization existed on Earth millions of years ago, what traces would it leave behind? Would we even know how to look for them? This is not a search for fossils or buried cities, but for subtle signatures in the geological record, for chemical ghosts in ancient layers of rock. It is a search for a message, not in a bottle, but in the very stone beneath our feet. Our story begins deep in the Antarctic ice sheet, a place of profound silence and pristine history. Here, a team of paleoclimatologists were drilling for ice cores, cylindrical samples that act as frozen time capsules of Earth's atmospheric past. For months, their work was routine, cataloging layers of volcanic ash, trapped air bubbles, and the subtle shifts in isotopes that spoke of ancient seasons. But then, they found an anomaly deep within a core sample dated to approximately 47 million years ago. A section of ice revealed a pattern that defied all natural explanation. It was a sequence of microscopic, magnetic particles, arranged in a way that was perfectly, mathematically, non-random. Imagine a string of pearls embedded in the ice, each pearl a tiny magnet, flipped north or south in a sequence that screamed of artificiality. It was not a language, not yet. It was pure, undeniable information. A binary code, frozen in time. The initial discovery was met with skepticism, attributed to equipment malfunction or some unknown geological process. But as more cores were drilled, miles apart, the same sequence appeared at the exact same geological stratum. It was a global layer, a single moment in Earth's history when something laid down a message for the future. The challenge of decoding this message was monumental. The team expanded, bringing in cryptographers, physicists, and mathematicians. They were not trying to translate words. They were trying to understand a thought process from a mind impossibly alien and ancient. The binary sequence was long, containing billions of bits. For years, they searched for a key, a Rosetta Stone to unlock its meaning. They tried every known mathematical approach, but the data remained opaque, a beautiful but silent string of ones and zeros. The breakthrough came from a young astromusicologist, a specialist in the potential mathematical structures of alien music. She suggested they stop thinking of it as a flat linear sequence. She proposed that the code was multidimensional, that it needed to be folded in on itself, like a complex piece of origami. Using a quantum computer to model the potential geometries, they input the binary string. For weeks, the machine churned through possibilities. And then, one quiet Tuesday morning, it resolved into a stable, three-dimensional form, a perfect, slowly rotating dodecahedron, its surface shimmering with the data points. They had found the key. The message was not meant to be read, it was meant to be observed as a complete, perfect object. As the team navigated the virtual structure of the message, they realized it was a nested library of information, a series of layers, each one unlocking the next. The outermost layer was simple, elegant, and universal. It was a visual representation of the fundamental constants of physics. The speed of light, Planck's constant, the gravitational constant, the fine structure constant. These were not depicted with numerals, but with geometric relationships, ratios of vibrating lines and resonating shapes. It was a greeting card to any intelligent life that understood the basic rules of the universe. It said, "We too understood this reality. We share this cosmos with you." It was a gesture of intellectual kinship across an unimaginable chasm of time. It was the first handshake. The scientists observing this felt a profound sense of connection, a feeling that transcended the millions of years of silence. They were not just looking at data. They were meeting a mind, a collective consciousness that had reached out, knowing that one day someone else would be there to receive their message. The lab was silent, filled only with a soft hum of servers and the quiet awe of a handful of humans. The next layer of the message was a map, but not of Earth's surface. As the camera of their virtual probe pushed through the geometric representation of physics, it resolved into a new image, a star chart. The constellations were familiar, yet distorted, like a memory of a face seen long ago. An astrophysicist on the team recognized it almost immediately. The positions of the stars were not as they are today, but as they would have appeared from Earth 47 million years ago. The slow cosmic dance of stellar drift had been perfectly accounted for. It was a time stamp engraved in the heavens, but the map showed more. It highlighted a specific region of space, a small, unremarkable cluster of stars in what we now call the constellation of Vela. And within that cluster, one star system was marked with a symbol of particular importance, a symbol that, in the universal language of their mathematics, simply meant origin. The implication was staggering. Were they telling us that they came from there? Or that something important to them, and perhaps to us, had originated in that distant, forgotten corner of the sky? The message was becoming more complex, a story unfolding with each layer. Deeper still they went, into the heart of the dodecahedron. The next layer was not physics or astronomy, but biology. And it was here that the true, mind-altering nature of this precursor civilization began to reveal itself. The message contained a detailed blueprint of a DNA-like structure, but it was not based on carbon. It was a silicon-based double helix, a crystalline form of life. The visuals rendered by the computer were breathtaking. They depicted beings that were not made of soft flesh and fragile bone, but of intricate, living crystal. Imagine creatures that shimmered in the light, their forms both biological and geological. They did not see the world through eyes of protein, but through crystalline lenses that could perceive a spectrum of light far beyond our own. They did not think with a brain of tangled neurons, but with a processing matrix that was part of their very atomic structure. They were, in essence, sentient geology. They were the planet made aware. The message conveyed that they did not live on the earth. They lived as the earth. Their life cycle was not measured in years, but in millennia. Their thoughts were as slow and profound as the grinding of tectonic plates. The story continued to unfold, now shifting from pure data to something more akin to a saga. This crystalline civilization, whom the researchers began to call the Silurians after the hypothesis, had a deep symbiotic relationship with the planet's magnetic field. They could perceive it, communicate through it, and even influence it in subtle ways. For them, the aurora borealis was not just a beautiful light show. It was a form of art, a collective expression of their consciousness painted across the sky. The message showed how they lived in vast, subterranean networks of crystal, growing their cities like geode cathedrals deep within the Earth's crust. They did not have technology in the way we understand it. They did not build machines. They grew them. Their tools, their homes, their information networks were all living extensions of themselves and the planet. There was no separation between nature and artifice. It was a form of existence so integrated, so holistic, that our own world of concrete and steel seemed brutal and primitive by comparison. They were the planet's dream, a brief, shining moment of geologic self-awareness. But this idyllic existence was not to last. The next layer of the message was somber, a tone of elegy conveyed through mathematical expressions of decay and entropy. The Silurians had a deep understanding of cosmic cycles. They could read the future not through mysticism, but through the deep time rhythms of the galaxy. They foresaw a coming cataclysm, not an asteroid or a supervolcano, but something far more fundamental. A cyclical pulse of high-energy radiation from the galactic core, a wave of cosmic fire that periodically scoured the inner arms of the Milky Way. They knew it would be lethal to their delicate, silicon-based biology. The radiation would shatter their crystalline structures, effectively dissolving their bodies and their consciousness. They calculated the arrival of this wave with pinpoint accuracy. They knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and peaceful, the exact date of their extinction. The message did not convey panic or fear, but a profound and graceful acceptance. It was simply the turning of a great cosmic wheel, and their time was coming to an end. They had no way to escape. Their existence was so intrinsically tied to the earth that Leaving the planet was like a human trying to leave their own body. They were slow, patient beings. A journey to another star system would take longer than their civilization had existed. And so, they made a choice. Instead of fighting their fate, they decided to embrace it. Their final great work would not be an ark to save themselves, but a time capsule to preserve their memory. They decided to leave a legacy, a message for the next intelligence that would inevitably arise from the fertile chemistry of Earth. They spent their last several millennia designing and constructing the message we were now reading. They used their connection to the planet's magnetic field to painstakingly arrange those microscopic particles, encoding their entire history, their science, their philosophy into a single, indestructible layer within the planet's geological memory. It was their gift to the future. A gift that said, "You are not the first. You are the next. And you are not alone." The final layers of the message were the most profound. They were not data, but a form of philosophy conveyed through pure, abstract mathematics. It was a meditation on the nature of existence, on the cycles of life and death, of creation and destruction. The Silurians did not see their end as a tragedy. They saw it as a form of cosmic recycling. Their constituent elements, their silicon, their memory, would be returned to the planet to become the building blocks for future life. They believed that consciousness was not a property of an individual, but a property of the universe itself, and that it would manifest again and again in different forms. They saw us, their carbon-based successors, not as strangers, but as their descendants, children of the same planetary mother, born into a different cosmic season. The message was a blessing, a welcome to the stage of intelligence. It was a parent's loving note, left on the mantelpiece for a child they would never get to meet. As the researchers reached the very center of the dodecahedron, the core of the message, they found one final piece of information. It was not a grand revelation, but a simple, elegant equation. An equation that modeled the probability of intelligent life emerging on a planet over a given period of time. It was their version of our Drake equation, but far more sophisticated, built from millions of years of observation and understanding. And its conclusion was both humbling and exhilarating. The equation showed, with near certainty, that life and intelligence were not rare flukes. They were fundamental, recurring properties of the universe. It predicted that civilizations would rise and fall on Earth like waves upon a shore, in a cycle lasting roughly 50 to 60 million years. It was telling us that our time, too, is finite. But it was also telling us that our end is not the end. Life would continue. The Earth would dream again. We are just one chapter in an immense, epic story. The implications of this discovery began to ripple outwards, first through the scientific community, and then to the world. It was the single greatest paradigm shift in human history. We were no longer the solitary masters of a lonely planet. We were inheritors. We were living in a house built upon the foundations of another's forgotten dream. History did not begin with the first human settlements in Mesopotamia. It began 47 million years ago in a world of crystal cathedrals and silent geological mines. every aspect of our science had to be reevaluated. Our understanding of evolution, of geology, of consciousness itself was suddenly incomplete. We were standing on the shoulders of giants we never knew existed. The feeling was not one of being diminished, but of being connected to something immeasurably vast and ancient. The deep existential loneliness that has haunted humanity for millennia began to evaporate, replaced by a sense of belonging to a long and sacred lineage. Let's take a moment to visualize their world, to feel the reality of this ancient civilization. Imagine a landscape not of green and brown, but of soft, glowing light. The sun filters down through a thick, hazy atmosphere and strikes the surface, which is not soil, but fields of immense, slowly growing crystals. The trees are towering crystalline structures that chime softly in the wind, their vibrations a form of slow, complex communication. The rivers are not of water, but of a viscous, silicon-rich gel flowing between the crystal formations. And moving through this world are the Silurians, beings of light and stone, their bodies intricate lattices of shimmering quartz. They do not walk, but glide, levitating slightly above the ground through a manipulation of the local magnetic field. Their movements are slow, deliberate, and graceful. There is no sound of voices, for they communicate directly, mind to mind, through resonant frequencies in their crystal bodies. The entire planet hums with a silent, collective thought. It is a world of pure pattern, of deep peace, of a consciousness fully integrated with its environment. A world without waste, without conflict, without separation. Now think about their perception of time. For a being whose life spans 1,000,000 years, a single human lifetime would be like a fleeting afternoon. Our frantic activity, our wars, our empires rising and falling in a few centuries would seem like the frantic, meaningless buzzing of insects. Their thought processes would be equally slow and profound. A single thought, a single philosophical concept might take them 1,000 years to fully formulate and explore. Their art would not be paintings or sculptures, but the slow, deliberate shaping of an entire mountain range over eons. Their music would be the harmonic resonances of tectonic plates, a symphony that takes 100,000 years to play a single chord. We are creatures of the frantic, chaotic surface, of the quick and the temporary. They were creatures of the deep, patient heart of the earth, of the slow and the eternal. Understanding them requires us to let go of our own sense of time, to slow our minds down, and to simply breathe with the vast, slow rhythm of the planet itself. The message they left contained practical information as well, a warning and a guide. They detailed the nature of the galactic radiation pulse. They described its effects, its periodicity, and the subtle astronomical signs that precede its arrival. According to their calculations, the next pulse is not imminent. It is not something for us to fear in our lifetimes, or even in the lifetime of our species. It is millions of years away, but it is coming. The cycle is real. They left this information not to frighten us, but to prepare us. They were giving us the one thing they never had: time. Time to learn, to grow, to perhaps even transcend the limitations of this planet. They were telling us that if we wished for our own legacy to continue, we must eventually learn to walk among the stars. Their message was a gentle but firm push, an encouragement from the past to reach for the future. It was the ultimate act of paying it forward. One of the most beautiful sections of the message was a gallery of their art. Since they could perceive a vast spectrum of electromagnetic radiation, their paintings were not made of pigment, but of carefully arranged magnetic fields and radio frequencies. The researchers had to use advanced visualization software to translate these works into a form humans could appreciate. The results were stunning. Imagine nebulae of pure information, swirling vortexes of color and light that changed and evolved as you observed them. These were not static images, but living, dynamic pieces of art that told stories through shifting patterns and harmonic frequencies. They depicted the birth of their world, the slow awakening of their consciousness, the intricate beauty of a silicon helix, and the silent, majestic dance of the cosmos as seen through their crystalline eyes. It was a glimpse into their soul, a final, beautiful expression of what it was like to be a living, thinking crystal, dreaming in the heart of a sleeping planet. The Silurian philosophy, as best as it could be translated, was one of radical interconnectedness. They did not have a concept for the individual self in the way that we do. They experienced consciousness as a collective, a planetary-wide network of thought. Each being was a node in a vast, sentient web. They were all part of one mind, one entity. When one of them died, its experiences and memories were not lost, but were reabsorbed into the collective, enriching the whole. This is why their end was not a tragedy to them. The collective consciousness would be shattered, but the information, the memories, the essence of their existence would remain dormant within the planet's very structure, waiting to be reawakened. In a way, they believed they would never truly be gone. They would become part of the mountain, part of the sand, part of the very air that the next generation of life would breathe. They would become a memory, dreaming in the stone. This discovery forced a profound reevaluation of religion and mythology. Across human cultures, there are ancient myths of earth spirits, of gods who sleep beneath the mountains, of a time before humans when the world was ruled by a different kind of being. Were these just stories, or were they a kind of deep genetic memory, a faint psychic echo of the Silurian consciousness resonating up through the eons? Could the human intuition that the earth is a living, conscious entity, a concept dismissed by modern science as primitive superstition, actually be a literal truth, a folk memory of a time when the planet truly was awake and aware? The lines between science, myth, and spirituality began to blur. We were perhaps not the first to feel a sense of reverence for this world. We were simply the first in a very long time to have forgotten why. The decoded message also provided potential answers to long-standing scientific puzzles. Take, for example, the periodic mass extinctions in Earth's fossil record. While many are linked to asteroid impacts or volcanism, some have remained mysterious, with no clear cause. The Silurian data on the galactic radiation pulse lined up perfectly with several of these unexplained extinction events. It seems that the history of life on this planet has been punctuated by these cosmic waves, which act as a great reset button, wiping the slate clean and allowing new forms of life to emerge. Evolution on Earth is not a gentle, linear progression, but a dramatic cycle of destruction and rebirth, driven by the rhythmic pulse of the Milky Way itself. We exist in one of the quiet periods, a gentle summer between devastating cosmic storms. Let's consider the technology that would be born from this discovery. Understanding the principles of silicon-based life could revolutionize our own computing and material science. Imagine growing computer processors that are self-repairing, or building materials that are as strong as diamond, but as flexible as living tissue. The Silurians' ability to manipulate magnetic fields could unlock new forms of clean energy and propulsion. Their message was not just a history lesson, it was a treasure map of scientific and technological possibilities. They had left us the keys to a kingdom we never knew existed. The challenge for humanity would be to use this knowledge with the same wisdom and grace as those who bequeathed it to us, to integrate it into our world without destroying ourselves in the process. It was a test, a gift, and a tremendous responsibility. The most personal part of the message was what the researchers came to call the resonance chamber. It was a section of the code designed to interact directly with the consciousness of the reader. When translated into specific audio frequencies and light patterns, it induced a state of deep, meditative calm in human subjects. Brainwave scans showed a pattern of activity unlike anything seen before, a state of perfect coherence and tranquility. It was their way of sharing not just their knowledge, but their state of being. It was a sliver of their profound peace, a moment of connection to their slow, geological consciousness. Listening to the resonance chamber was like feeling the slow, steady heartbeat of the planet itself. It was a calming whisper from the deep past, assuring us that in the grand scheme of things, everything was going to be all right. It was the universe's most ancient and profound lullaby. The discovery of the Silurians fundamentally altered our search for life elsewhere in the universe. We had always been looking for planets like our own, in what we call the habitable zone, the narrow band where liquid water can exist. But the Silurians showed us that life could be far more exotic and resilient than we ever imagined. Perhaps there are silicon-based life forms on planets we considered too hot or too cold. Perhaps there is gaseous life floating in the atmospheres of gas giants, or plasma-based life dancing in the coronas of stars. The universe suddenly seemed infinitely more creative and infinitely more populated than we had ever dared to dream. The silence we had heard from the stars was not necessarily the sound of emptiness, but perhaps just the sound of our own limited imagination. We had been listening for whispers in a language we understood, while the cosmos was shouting in a million other tongues. The team of scientists who made the discovery became reluctant global icons, but they did not embrace fame. Instead, they became quiet advocates for a new way of thinking, a deep time perspective. They urged humanity to think not in terms of election cycles or quarterly profits, but in terms of millennia in terms of geological epochs. They argued that the Silurian message was a call to stewardship. We are temporary custodians of this world, and we have a responsibility to preserve it for the next consciousness that will arise millions of years from now. Our purpose, they suggested, was not just to live for ourselves, but to be good ancestors, to pass on a healthy and vibrant world, just as the Silurians, in their own way, had passed on their wisdom to us. It was a profound shift from a human-centric worldview to a planet-centric one. Imagine lying on a hill on a clear night, looking up at the stars. Before this discovery, you might have felt a sense of smallness, of insignificance in the face of the vast, empty cosmos. But now, with the knowledge of the Silurians, the feeling is different. You are not just a fleeting arrangement of atoms on a random speck of dust. You are the current torchbearer of a legacy of consciousness that is tens of millions of years old. The ground beneath you is not just dirt and rock. It is a library, a tomb, and a cradle. The planet is not your property. It is your ancestor. The silence of the night is not empty. It is filled with the patient, sleeping memory of a civilization of crystal dreamers. You are a part of a story so immense and so beautiful that it takes your breath away. You are not small. You are connected. You are home. The final, translated words of the message, rendered from the abstract mathematics into the closest possible human sentiment, were simple. They were not a grand command or a complex prophecy. They were a gentle piece of advice. Breathe, the message said. Notice the beauty. Know that you are part of the whole. The cycle is long, and all things have their season. Do not fear the turning of the page. It is all one book. It was the ultimate expression of their peaceful acceptance, their deep wisdom. It was a final gift of comfort, a reminder that even in the face of inevitable endings, there is a profound and enduring beauty to the journey. It was a message that resonated, not with the intellect, but with the deepest, most quiet part of the human spirit. It was the truth, whispered from the heart of the world. The world after the discovery became a quieter, more contemplative place. The frantic pace of modern life began to slow as people grappled with this new, immense timescale. Art, music, and literature became infused with themes of deep time and cosmic cycles. A new kind of environmentalism was born, one based not on fear of our own extinction, but on a sense of sacred duty to our planetary lineage. We started building things to last, not for a century, but for 1,000,000 years. We began to see our own technology not as a way to conquer nature, but as a way to integrate with it more harmoniously, inspired by the Silurian model. Humanity, for the first time, began to think like a planet. We began to grow up. The Silurians had given us more than just their story. They had given us a path to our own maturity as a species. One of the most profound societal changes was the universal adoption of a new holiday called Deep Time Day. On this day, all the lights in all the cities of the world were turned off. All the engines fell silent. For 24 hours, humanity would simply stop and listen. People would gather in fields and on mountains to look at the stars without the interference of artificial light, and to place their hands on the ground, feeling the quiet, ancient presence beneath them. It was a day of remembrance, of gratitude, and of quiet contemplation. It was a day to honor those who came before and to think about those who will come after. It was a day to remember that we are just a brief, beautiful flicker between two vast eternities of silence. A day to feel our connection to the long, slow, and sacred story of our world. The location of the original ice core discovery in Antarctica was declared a World Heritage Site, a place of pilgrimage for the entire human race. It was left pristine, untouched, save for a single, simple monument. The monument was not a grand statue or an imposing building. It was a large, perfectly polished sphere of obsidian reflecting the vast, empty sky. And on its surface, etched in every human language, were the final words translated from the Silurian message. It is all one book. Visitors would come and sit in the profound silence of the Antarctic, looking at this simple monument, and feel the weight and the beauty of 47 million years. They would feel the presence of their ancient, crystalline ancestors, and the promise of a future they would never see. It was a place of profound peace, the epicenter of humanity's newfound sense of place in the cosmos. Let us return to the star chart, to that system in the constellation of Vela, marked with the symbol for origin. With the new technologies and understanding derived from the Silurian message, we built a new kind of telescope, one capable of seeing with unimaginable clarity. We turned it towards that system, and what we found was not a cradle, but a tomb. The system star had long since died, collapsing into a quiet, cold, white dwarf. The planets orbiting it were barren, frozen husks. It became clear that the Silurians were not pointing to their home. They were pointing to the origin of the galactic pulse, the source of the radiation wave that ended their world, and that will one day wash over ours. It was the ultimate, final piece of their warning, a silent, celestial lighthouse marking the location of the storm. It was a final, poignant gesture of guidance, a last act of a long-forgotten parent, protecting the children they would never know. So, as we drift now towards sleep, let this story settle within you. The earth is not just a rock. It is a vessel of memory, a library of ancient dreams. We are not an accident, a lonely blip of awareness in a silent universe. We are the inheritors of a profound legacy, the current chapter in a story that stretches back into the mists of deep time. The ground beneath you is sacred. The silence is not empty, and our future is not just our own, but a promise we make to the past. The Silurians are gone. Their crystal bodies return to the dust of the planet. But their consciousness, their wisdom, their peaceful spirit lives on. It lives on in the message they left for us, a message that has forever changed our understanding of who and what we are. They are the dream, sleeping in the stone. And we are the dreamers, now awake. The revelation of the Silurian civilization reshaped our world. It wasn't an invasion or a distant radio signal, but a quiet, geological truth that had been waiting patiently for us to learn how to listen. The greatest discovery in human history came not from looking up, but from looking down and looking within. We learned that we are part of a cycle, a grand, recurring rhythm of life on this planet. Our solitude in the universe was an illusion. created by a veil of time. Now we know we are part of a lineage. The Earth is not just our home, it is our ancestor, our library, and our legacy. The story of the Silurians provides a humbling yet empowering new perspective. Their end was not a tragedy, but a transformation, and their final act was one of supreme generosity, a gift of knowledge and wisdom to the future. Thank you for joining this journey into the deep past. May this story bring you a sense of profound peace and connection as you drift into a deep and restful sleep. Don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into the quiet corners of science and imagination. If this story resonated with you, please leave a like. And for the comments, I leave you with this thought. If we could leave one message behind for the next civilization, millions of years from now, what should it say?